We're here with World Trade Center CEO and President Miles Hansen. Miles, thank you so much for coming on. I've been getting so many inbound requests around these SBA disaster relief loans, and no one knows them better than you. So tell us what's going on. What is this new program? How can people apply? Let's dig into it.
Yeah, absolutely, Clint. And before I jump into some of the details, maybe I can just provide a little bit of context that could be helpful for the people out there watching from their home offices, whatever they may look like right now. And if my kids jump in right now, apologies. I think we're all being kind to each other with the challenges of working from home.
Oh, if your kids jump in, we're gonna interview them too. That'd be
perfect.
That'd be wonderful.
I got little kids, so they may or may not have pants on. So we'll try to keep things appropriate on
Perfect.
the live stream today.
You know what? I may or may not have pants on, so no big deal.
That's exactly right. But anyways, there's been a lot in the news over the past couple of days about the stimulus package that the Senate approved. I know Mitt Romney's been really supportive to Silicon Slopes and to the groups that we're working with as well to make people help people be educated about that. But the SBA has been playing a very, very central role in the stimulus package, and there are new programs that are coming online with that. In addition to what you talked about, these emergency disaster loans that were a new program that was set up about a week and a half ago. And so maybe I'll kind of take both together, because over the next few days, small businesses are going to want to know about both of them and how they work and how they can plug in and engage.
Yeah, that's
First
great.
off, on the stimulus package, lots in the news. I won't go into the details because so much is available online. I know that Senator Romney's really good on that. But just a quick recap, 5 pillars to the stimulus package. There's got the health pillar, so a lot of resources coming to help hospitals, help healthcare providers. The faster, more successful we are in providing for health for people out here, across the country, the easier it's going to be to push through the economic pain we're all experiencing. You get the small business loans and grants pillar that I'll talk more about. The workers and families pillar. These are the direct payments to people, and also an increase in unemployment insurance is available. There are significant adjustments in the 4th pillar on tax laws to try to ease the burden on small businesses. So I think we should talk a little bit about that as well. And then the 5th pillar is providing support to distressed industries and institutions. So that's helping out our airlines, our hotel industries, other larger corporations, and then block grants to states so that the states have some additional resources to do what they need to do locally. And so within that context, let's talk about the small business loans and grants. So already, like you mentioned, about a week and a half ago, in the phase 2 coronavirus package that Congress passed, they set up these emergency disaster loans and expanded the program. Utah was the first state in the country for every county to be qualified as a disaster area, which then made it possible for businesses to apply. These loans, the disaster assistance loans, there's no personal guarantee for loans that are less than $200,000. They can be capped up to, I believe, $2 million. The government will pay the principal and interest on these loans for the first 6 months. And as part of the new stimulus package, they are making it so that businesses will get $10,000 as soon as they apply for the loan, and they can keep that even if they're denied for the loan. So the idea is, how do we get cash to businesses that need it very badly as quickly as possible? To qualify, businesses have to show that they've had significant losses due to COVID-19. And also they have to be in one of these disaster areas, which all of Utah is a disaster area, and they have to be a small business. This new stimulus package that
real quick, Miles, on that, yeah. What qualifies as a small business?
Yep. So the SBA has guidelines. If you go to SBA's website, if you're a small business, you can go through. It varies a little bit industry by industry. The easiest measure, the most consistent one, is 500 employees or fewer.
Right.
And then depending on your industry, sometimes you can have more than 500. And sometimes there are revenue caps. And typically, you often see revenue caps across different industries of about $35 million or less. And so the simplest answer is 500 employees or fewer, $35 million in revenue or fewer, with the caveat that there is some variance by industry. But if somebody just Googles, am I a small business, they'll find checklists you can go through and pretty quickly determine whether or not you qualify
as
a small business.
Okay, perfect.
In this new stimulus package that we expect Congress hopefully will get finished today, and hopefully the White House signs tomorrow, there is an additional $349 billion in small business loans. And again, same requirements for small businesses, fewer than 500 employees, revenue of about $35 million or less. This package creates what's called Paycheck protection loans. And if you're a small business, the way you figure out how much you'd be eligible for is you average out your monthly payroll cost over the past year. You times that by 2.5, and that gives you what the loan would be eligible for. These loans are designed to help companies get through this liquidity crisis everybody's facing as we pause the economy while we're fighting coronavirus. These loans would be fully guaranteed by the federal government up until the end of this year and 85% after that. And here's the kicker, it's a loan, but as long as businesses use the loan to cover payroll and they don't lay people off, they're paying rent and other fixed costs for this 8-week period, that part of the loan would be entirely forgiven. And so the loan is for basically what your fixed costs are for 2.5 months. You get that, you use it for what it's designed to do. You're going to get that loan forgiven, or at least most of it forgiven, which obviously then it's more like a grant than a loan. To get these loans, there's a couple different processes, and it's a little bit confusing because it's government and bureaucracy, and they like to make things confusing for us. The emergency disaster loans, you have to apply directly through the SBA. For the paycheck protection loans, if you are a business and you already have a lender, right now today, get online and find out if your lender is SBA approved. If yes, then you don't have to deal with the SBA. You can go straight to your lender and they'll be able to take care of you and get you these loans and get the capital flowing to your company.
Which means like most banks in Utah, right?
Yep, that's exactly. So the vast majority of banks, they're SBA approved. If you happen to see in there that it's not SBA approved for whatever reason, it doesn't mean it's a bad bank, just means they haven't participated in these programs before. SBA is working to get even non-approved lenders able to administer these loans. It just may take a little bit more time. And if you don't have a lender yet, fantastic. You're doing a great job on your cash flow. You can go straight to the SBA. And so the SBA, if you go to their website, if you Google, SBA Utah District, you'll see their website. You'll see they've got an email address, a hotline, lots of really good information. And that's how companies can start reaching out and getting some support.
So as far as timeline, as you mentioned, there's $349 billion available in this stimulus package. But I imagine every small business in the country is going to be going after this. Would you recommend people do this as soon as possible?
Yeah. Yep. Right now, there's really no value in waiting. Again, once this gets stood up. So right now, this is a package that the White House has agreed, the Senate has agreed. The House, it sounds like, is dithering a little bit around some of the details, but this core aspect of the program, I don't think will change much. Once it's signed, the law says that SBA has to move forward with the program within 15 days. And so there's no reason to wait. I would jump right in, start going through the process immediately.
Yeah, and then we just watched a press conference with Speaker Pelosi. She says she has no doubt it'll pass tomorrow.
Yeah,
I think Friday is when they'll pass this thing. How bad do you think this is going to get, Miles?
Clint, that's a great question. Yeah, I wish that some of us, somebody had a crystal ball out there. I think what we're clearly seeing is there was kind of the immediate crisis. My guess is that in every organization, every family, last week we were in that crisis phase. We were all transitioning, figuring out how to work from home, things shutting down. Now with the stimulus, we're starting to see some cohesive policies and processes in place to keep our economy going, even during this period where we prioritize health to make sure that we see a situation here in Utah and the United States that's more like South Korea and less like Italy or Iran or a few other countries. It seems like here in Utah, and not that seem like absolutely here in Utah, we're way ahead of the curve. And there's no surprise that here we have this hive mentality with the beehive state and the symbolism of industry and cooperation and everything else. Those cultural elements, those strengths, we're seeing that play out in a really significant way here in the state.
We haven't issued a shelter in place order like other states. Even Summit County, there's been a little bit of misinformation. They didn't issue a shelter in place order. What Summit County did was just basically issue like a stay at home order. And I know that sounds like it's the same thing, but it turns out it's not. A shelter in place order is quite a bit different. There are states that have done that. That's something that, over the past 24, 48 hours, the tech and business community, probably most of my inbound's been around that. And then these SBA loans. What's your recommendation on that? Where are you thinking we're heading there?
As we look at the task force that the governor set up, and World Trade Center Utah has been a part of that process. For anybody out there who has not seen the plan that we rolled out on Tuesday, Google Utah's economic response to COVID-19 plan. I forget the exact title, but you'll find it. In there, we really lay out in a compelling way that we don't have to choose between protecting our health and protecting the economy, but we can do both at the same time. Testing was a major challenge. We've seen the daily testing rates going up, tenfold just in the past couple of days, and that will continue to grow significantly. That puts us in a position where I think we can take more of a scalpel to how we protect ourselves, and not so much the sledgehammer or machete approach. We have to shut everything down, like unfortunately some states have had to do because things got out of control. And so I know that I've got great confidence in our public health officials. We're working very hard to keep us ahead of the curve to make sure that as this thing grows, and it's going to grow here in Utah, there's no question about it, but let's make sure that we are ramping up our ability to provide good health to the people who need it. So as it grows, we don't get in a situation where New York is experiencing and California is, where the demands on the health system is outpacing the capacity of the health system. We're not there yet here in Utah. We are putting plans in place to make sure that we don't get there. As long as we keep that, make sure that happens, then we can continue to lean in on the economic side with, maximizing the extent to which businesses can participate in these federal programs, putting new state programs into place, and making sure that we are all learning how we can engage in a safe manner, while also remaining participating in the economy.
Yeah, there was a physicians group that called for the governor to issue a shelter in place order, but I haven't seen any state state health officials make that call yet. So we'll see what happens. But yeah, it seems like Utah's doing a decent job here, as good as we possibly can. And I think you're absolutely right. Like, our ability as a state and a community to rally around each other and support each other is second to none.
Yeah.
What else should people know about these SBA loans as this thing is evolving?
Clint, I'll answer that by also giving one example of the way that we are all rallying together. So as part of this task force, World Trade Center Utah was asked to stand up a committee around federal engagement. And so we stood it up on Monday. We had our action plan in place on Tuesday, had a meeting yesterday, and Senator Romney joined that. What we've done is we've convened all of our federal partners. So every federal agency that's got an office here in Utah, everybody on the congressional delegation, and then key state partners here. And we've put a plan in place so that we can all work together to make sure that, again, as many businesses as possible can benefit from these federal programs and other state programs by getting information out, by putting together what we're calling a rapid response team. So imagine the SBA. They've got 2 people to process these loans on their staff here in Utah. They are already being hit with a tsunami of requests, and that's going to increase significantly as the stimulus deal is worked through. So we recognize as a group that's a bottleneck. So World Trade Center Utah, working with our partners, we put out a call for volunteers to serve on this rapid response team just yesterday. What we're doing is this team is going to be behind the scenes. So that phone number I referenced on SBA's website, the email address, there's no way the SBA team could respond to that. But we're going to have a team working with them to make sure that as businesses reach out, they get responses very quickly. Basic things, the team will handle. More complex things,
Did Miles just cut out for you, Drew?
Yeah. He did warn us that his neighbors had been watching Netflix, and Let's see if he comes back here.
We're going to come back to Drew, to Miles here in a second. He has cut out for us. This is the magic of technology and Zoom and internet connection in the age of COVID-19. I do want to point out, as we're trying to get Miles back on for those still watching here, as he mentioned, there's $349 billion in SBA loans available. Reach out to your local bank, your local lender about getting involved in that. Also, make sure you look at those SBA disaster relief funds. All of Utah qualifies as that. So check that out. And he also is part of the task force with the governor's office that released the economic response plan. I would encourage people to check that out. I know that there's some confusion around that. It's pretty high level around what exactly is the plan that the state is putting together. I would encourage people to check that out and see. And now we have Miles back. Miles, continue as you were.
I'm sorry about that, Clint. At what point did I drop off?
You were talking about the economic response plan, and that's when it cut out.
Perfect. So with this rapid response team that I was talking about, we've had tremendous volunteer support for it. Just in the past 12 hours since we put out the call for volunteers, we've had 50, 60, or 70 people who signed up. I just got an email with a spreadsheet of 42 others that want to come join this team. And so I underscore this for two things. One, this is the type of teamwork that happens here in Utah that's going to make sure we're able to help support businesses through this difficult time. And two, I want people out there to know as they're reaching out to the SBA and others for assistance, there is thousands of other companies doing the same thing. We're doing everything we can as a community to support our partners in the SBA. So as quickly and efficiently as possible, we're able to get these applications processed, get money flowing to businesses, because we all know how badly they need it right now.
Hey, Miles, as you cut out there, I was telling the audience about the economic response plan and the plan that was released by the governor's task force that you were a part of. There has been some confusion. I've seen a lot of it on Twitter just about what exactly that plan is asking Utahns to do.
Yeah.
And what exactly that plan is outlining. And obviously it's a living document that's going to be updated as this thing continues to progress and as we learn more details. But can you give like a high level, some detail around what the plan is and what's been released?
Yeah, no, absolutely. In some of that commentary and feedback is spot on. This is a framework that we can visualize as a collectively the community, how we're going to think about this problem and how we're going to address it. And so in the plan, people are probably familiar with it. It helps define the three phases of recovery, both the urgent phase where we are right now, the stabilization phase, and then the recovery phase. And really what the thought process behind that is, let's try to define things. Let's try to put some structure and try to model what this looks like to help tamp down some of the uncertainty, some of the confusion, some of the fear about what's going to happen. With this framework, now we can say, okay, let's focus on this urgent phase. We've established some metrics that tell us when we're going to be beyond the urgent phase into the stabilization phase where we can expect things to open up a little bit. And then some metrics there to help us know when we are in the recovery phase. And it identifies on a very, very top level, right? This is wave tops, the types of things we'd expect to do as a state, on a local basis, as individual communities and families and businesses in each of these phases. In terms of what is it asking people to do right now, it's asking them to stringently follow the public health guidelines, social distancing, teleworking, everything we can do on that front. And then at the same time, to stay engaged in the economy. People will notice in there, it talks about what we can do. Sometimes there's a perception that we can't do anything. We need to hunker down our houses, not buy anything, not do anything. And yet I know several companies have reached out to us to share what they are doing to keep their people safe, to keep the public safe, but to keep the economy moving forward. And part of the message here is within the framework that our public health experts have created for us, there's still a whole lot of activity that can happen. And so I'd encourage people to go to the page that talks about what we can do in the economy, to review that and to think through creatively, how do we innovate what we are doing across the economy to make sure we're able to continue to plug in and stay engaged. And then the final bit, in each of the tables, in the middle part of the document, the urgent, the stabilization, recovery phases, there's a public-private partnership and policy column. That's where this federal engagement really comes in. And that's where we are, as a working group, as a committee of this, we're operationalizing this. And so now if that document provides a broad framework, if somebody were to take a look at our action plan, it goes down into very specific details about how we are operationalizing the federal aspect of this. And there are people doing the same thing around our critical infrastructure, around our state and local resources, around other policy ideas that the state's working on to help, for instance, other grant programs and things that help companies. And so now that we have the framework, we all can think through how do we operationalize this in a tactical way. And that's true not just for government, business, or civic leaders, but it's true for the small business owner as well. Within this framework, how do we operationalize what we're doing to keep people employed, to keep the economy going? And so we don't feel like we all just need to go down into our bunkers and just sit still for the next 6 weeks, because that's not the message that we're trying to convey to everybody here in the state.
And Miles, as the head of the World Trade Center Utah, how do you see this affecting trade in the short term with other countries?
Yeah, no, it's interesting. If you compare this crisis to the financial crisis in 2008, 2009, what we saw there was, liquidity crisis, a lot of problems, but trade actually became a very important driver of the recovery. This one's different because we see a very significant dip and some liquidity issues. And yet, because of the nature of this crisis, trade is slowing down, volumes and flows of goods and services is slowing down, travel, just getting on airplanes, right? People aren't getting on airplanes right now. And so that creates a very significant problem for all the companies in the state who are engaging in international trade. Trade supports 1 in 4 jobs here in the state. International sales adds $5 billion in revenue just to small businesses here in the state. And so what we're doing is saying, okay, there are some significant challenges. And as an organization, we are recalibrating our grant programs, the free consultations, the free market research that we do, the business-to-business matchmaking. We, on a regular basis, we can connect, just about any Utah business with whoever they need to connect with in any market in the world. We're recalibrating that to say, okay, how do we do that in an environment where it's harder for people to get on planes and go places? And then we've also, as companies figure out how they make these adjustments, we've been doing a series of webinars with tax attorneys, employment attorneys, trade attorneys, other banks and accountants. We're going to do one with John Hansen next week to get kind of a big global perspective. But the idea is to deliver expertise to companies so they can get the best input they need as they work to figure out how they adjust to the crisis. But long term, we're going to pull through this thing. We're going to get back to where people are getting on airplanes. It may be several months until we get there. So in the meantime, it's how do we help our companies minimize the extent to which they need to retreat. So then when things ramp back up, they still have a presence in market. And all of a sudden, it creates this opportunity where they can go after market share because other companies in other parts of the country and world had to retreat more than they did during this urgent phase that we're in.
How do you see this changing or affecting our reliance on China?
Yeah, that's a great question. Just last week, we had on some legal and business experts who are in Beijing. I think what we're seeing is that this has further accelerated the trend of moving operations away from China that began when some of the trade dispute and trade war activity began about 18 to 24 months ago. So in a lot of ways, there was inertia of companies moving away from China because of the trade dispute. And now because of how significant this has been in China, this has been accelerating that trend. And so I think that what we'll see is a continuation and maybe an acceleration of companies looking for alternative places to put their supply chains, to put their manufacturing. On the flip side, though, for companies here in Utah like PMI Foods or doTERRA or Nu Skin, they all do $1 billion or more per year in revenue in China. None of this changes the fact that China is the biggest population, and in the next 10 years or so will be the biggest market. And so companies are still going to want to engage and sell there, even if on the supply chain side, you do see some people, a lot of businesses moving to look at other options.
Miles, I believe you have a webinar tomorrow. Is that right? Do you know what time? And
Yep. Yep, absolutely. So we've got a couple actually. At 9:30 a.m., Parsons, Bailey, and Latimer, they're a great law firm here in Utah. They're going to do a webinar to help companies understand what recent changes in leave policies means for their companies. And then at 11 or 11:30, I forget when, we are doing a webinar with Kiln and SBA, and somebody from Zions is going to be there to really go into more depth on these SBA loans. And we can get you the links, and we'd love to have you guys share those out.
Yeah, we'll promote those out. Miles, I'm sure we'll have you back on again as this thing progresses to give us more details. We'll probably even have you on our one of these town halls we've been doing every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. In fact, I know we'll have you on. So thank you so much, Miles. Appreciate you taking the time today. And everyone, make sure you check out these webinars that Miles just mentioned that are happening tomorrow. I think it's critical that small businesses and the entrepreneurs here in the state of Utah take advantage of this immediately, this $349 billion that's available in SBA loans. Thanks, Miles. We'll see you again.
Thanks, Clint. Have a good one.
You too.